everyone. This is Melissa Keller from Vineyard Worship. We are excited to announce the launch of Vineyard Worship Essentials, a comprehensive training program for Vineyard Worship leaders. Our summer cohorts are filling up now. Over 8 weeks, you'll engage in lively discussions with other worship leaders from around the world, grow together in your leadership skills, and form lasting connections. Whether you're just starting out or looking to hone your skills, Vineyard Worship Essentials is the perfect way to discover how God is calling you to this incredible ministry of leading others into worship. Visit vineyardworship.com/essentials for more information and to sign up. Join us today and take the first step in your journey.
What up, everybody? You're listening to the Ferment podcast. My name is Adam, and today my friend Derek McTavish is with me. Derek, good to see you, buddy.
You too, man.
Well, why don't you do everybody a favor and just tell them who you are, where you're at, and what you do right now.
I'm Derek McTavish. I'm in Athens, Georgia, at the Athens Vineyard Church. I've been a worship leader guy there for, this is almost 20 years. So,
that's amazing.
Yeah, I know. You see the grays in your own beard, and you're like, it has been 20 years. No, I've been there a while. Little small church in a college town. Athens is a great place to be.
Truly. And I know you lead worship there at the Athens Vineyard, but what do you do for your day job?
I work for the government, so,
You work for the man.
Got a government job in Athens, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I work for the man, yes.
That's so funny, Derek. That's so good, dude. Yeah, before we jump into the things maybe I wanted to talk about, I do want to give a shout out to Athens. I think it's one of the best kept secrets in the South. You want to make a commercial for it?
Man, for the town the size it is, and I guess it's probably largely because of the university, but there's so much culture, so much good live music. The restaurants we have for a town the size we have is pretty incredible. It's about 100,000 people, 130 with students here, and there's just a lot of options for arts and music and eats.
That's right.
That market's great. With the university, we get a lot of cool cultural elements. They do shows I've been taking my kids to shows they do at the university hall that we're at the music school. We went and saw a proper Scottish band a few months ago. The kids went and saw a Japanese drumming group. Yeah. They do all sorts of stuff like that. So we get a little of everything. Wilco's coming next week.
That's right.
To the Classic Center. So,
just suffering for Jesus down there watching Wilco. Derek, before we maybe launch into the other conversation, tell everybody a little bit about the music history of Athens, because I don't know that everyone knows the degree to which Athens has been a shaper of American music culture.
Yeah, it's funny, and I'll probably leave some stuff out. Of course, I think most people know REM.
Yeah.
But the B-52s are from Athens as well.
That's right.
We've got a lot. Widespread Panic is from here. You got a lot of bands coming out more recently. But I forget this. I worked for a little music store here in town for years that unfortunately closed their doors last Christmas after 80 years.
Wow.
Which is pretty incredible. REM's building was right next door, so it was just kind of commonplace. But I forget, man, they were like the biggest band in the world in the mid to late 90s. I mean, they're huge.
Yeah.
It's weird to think about. But yeah, Athens has long been a bastion for music, and going back to the late 80s, early 90s, really when it popularity. I mean, there's a myriad of guys. Bill Maloney came out of here. Vigilantes of Love, obviously smaller scale, but we love Bill, and so much good stuff. So
Yeah, I guess when I think about Athens, I think if you're even kind of close, it's worth a day trip just to check the city out and do your School of Rock moment. You just need to go. Yeah. You need to go walk the streets where REM, the B-52s, Widespread Panic, Bill Maloney. I mean, there's just it's a real thing. I love it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I think I probably take it for granted. It's funny that pandemic really, kind of emerging back into town after that. I was like, oh yeah, all my favorite restaurants I hadn't been to. There's a little Salvadoran restaurant that's probably my favorite place to eat. And then I haven't been able to get over there much since prior to prior to the pandemic. But no, I think things are rocking and rolling. Everything's back to normal.
That's great.
Good stuff.
Derek, tell everybody a little bit about how you grew up. I mean, they can hear it in your voice. You're a Southern boy. Talk to us a little bit about your upbringing.
I mean, I grew up in Atlanta, so not that Southern. But my mom's from Athens. So, I grew up spending my regularly. We were here visiting my mother. I did my laundry at my grandma's house in college. So it was always kind of a second home, anyways. And then, man, I fell in love with Athens when I was here, and just never left. And I met a girl from here, and that's all she wrote. But yeah, I grew up in the Atlanta area, but Athens was always kind of a second home as a kid, and it was always a place we went, regularly. And of course, growing up a Georgia football fan too, you have that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Which of course has been a good couple of years for that. But it's weird to think I've been here more of my life than I was not here.
Yeah.
To this point. So, but yeah, I grew up, about an hour away, and so my dad still lives over that way.
Did you grow up in a Christian home?
I did. We went to church when I was little, and then we moved. I was probably 5 or 6, and we started. We found a church, and then just kind of started going less and less. And for several years, we really didn't do much. I mean, my parents were, they raised us with, Christian beliefs, things like that, obviously, and then around middle school, I got interested in church through the invite of some friends, and my family started going to church again when I got interested in church.
Wow.
About 13, 14 or whatever. So
why did you get interested in church, Derek?
I got invited to a camp by a buddy at school, and I went with him, and that's all she wrote.
What kind of camp was it? Was it like a Baptist camp or something?
It was a United Methodist summer camp. So, and we had grown up. My dad grew up Methodist, and my mom did too. So we were in the Methodist church, and it was really funny because we had the same pastor at 2 different churches for extended periods of time. And we happened to move to an area, and then he got moved to that church.
Yeah.
And so you tend to get that shifting of pastors, but we didn't deal with that quite as much. And and that pastor, his son's also a pastor, and he was ended up being one of my big mentors early in my faith through into high school, college, and stuff. So a lot of strong connections there.
When did you start leading worship, Derek?
Well, I guess officially my freshman year of college at the University of Georgia's Wesley Foundation. I was doing music for the freshman ministry, and then it kind of grew from there. It's funny, that was 97, and that was really my first exposure to Vineyard as well.
Oh, yeah?
Because all the music they were doing at the time was Vineyard music, pretty much like 80%, 90% of it. And it's the first I'd ever even heard of it. It's kind of what got me hooked. And I remember we went to visit Vineyard one time. I was really surprised. I was like, this is a church. I didn't even know that. I thought it was just a record label or something. So
yeah.
That was kind of where my love for the Vineyard kind of started growing, was in those days. So.
All right. So Derek, if you were leading worship in the late 90s and all the songs were Vineyard, that means you have a pretty good knowledge of the back catalog.
Yeah, pretty good, pretty decent knowledge. Yeah.
That's so good. I always love hearing that. So what songs were you leading in 1997? Do you remember what you first started playing?
Like Good to Me.
Yeah.
I think that's a Craig Mousseau tune. Yeah. Sweet Mercies.
Yeah.
Well, pretty much anything David Ruiz, I guess.
Yeah.
We did a lot of stuff from the Brownsville crew down there in Pensacola.
Yeah.
And I'm sure some of that stuff was mixed from other sources too. But
it was.
Golly, Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon you. That song got me good back in the day.
Did it? That's an interesting pull.
Yeah. Well, I went when I was in high school, I went to the revival and they played that there, and kind of a pretty big mountaintop experience for me, going down there. And then I think, and somebody posted this the other day on the Facebook page, but talking about, we were joking about songs from Enter the Worship Circle. I think that probably more than any worship album of that era, that first Enter the Worship Circle record is just I think we played You've Redeemed My Soul 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago now. So, I mean,
that song is a perfect song.
it's so good. I think I've probably led that song more than any other song ever. So
I love that. That's great. Such a unique story. It's so funny. And you do tend to forget some of those records and until you slow down a little bit and go, oh yeah, that's right. That was a really big deal. Well, here's what I want to do today, Derek. This is the first episode in a little mini series that I've been thinking about for a while. And I'll just set it up like this for everybody who's listening. What I want to do over the next couple of weeks is I wanted to talk to a worship leader from a smaller church, and then maybe a worship leader from a medium church, and then a worship leader from a large church. And I just wanted to have a little conversation about what are the gifts and the challenges of being a worship leader in all these different kinds of contexts. I think sometimes we assume maybe a lot of different things about leading worship in different size spaces or congregations, and we don't always recognize the gifts that are there or even the special challenges. So I just wanted to have a conversation with you because I know that the Vineyard Church there in Athens, it's a smaller congregation. I've been there. It's a great place. And so I would love to maybe start there by having you just tell us a little bit about your church because you've been there for a minute.
Yeah. And the church initially planted like back in 98. The planning pastor's still there. And I came on board fall of 2003. And I actually started coming to the men's group before I even started coming to church. I came with a friend who was going there at the time, and I had finished up the school. I had done a year of internship at Wesley Foundation, the campus ministry there, and I was kind of hanging around trying to do the music thing. Got a job at the music store. Was kind of central to that. I didn't know I'd be at that music store for 16 years, but that's a different story. And I started coming to the church for the Vineyard for Bible study, and then Kyle, the pastor, asked me to fill in doing worship one time, and that was kind of just worked and it clicked, and he and I have a great rapport, and there's an element to, I don't know, I feel like very regularly we're in tune with one another and unawares. What God's working on me on is a lot of times what God's working with him on, and really makes the planning and implementation of church smooth and easy. And it's, and I mean, of course, so many years have gone by since then. I'm sure there was some learning. I was a young man. There was a learning curve, I'm sure. Especially
always
me. But I just kind of think they officially hired me or whatever in early 2004. But I've been there since 2003, and I'm doing it a bit. And it would be difficult to not be there. Just to say that, it's so familiar and so comfortable, and right. It's the place God can challenge me like he can anywhere else.
Well, Derek, it's awesome that you've been leading for like 20 years at one spot.
Yeah, it's great, and I've had, of course, we're in a college town, so the rotating cast of people, I think there's one, it's me and the pastor's family, and his kids are all grown now. It's just him and his wife now, and one other family, or they're it from when I started going there. And you get that in a college town. There's just transitory nature of people in and out. We've always kind of attracted like grad students, a lot of passing through, young families going back to school, and they, I don't know, that's just kind of been a place where we tend to attract folks, and
that makes a lot of sense.
It's interesting, but I've got a handful of people on the worship team, I think, that have been with me 10 plus years.
That's awesome.
There's a familiarity there, and we've got some new people just in the last couple of years who have been great contributors. And, I feel like when you came to us, I think that was probably 2009?
Yeah.
Something like that. Golly, that's a long time ago. We were in that building by the train tracks. We're 4 places past that now. And that's a journey I can get into a little bit if you want me to talk about it. It's kind of wild. We were probably at that point in the 100 range, 120, 130 people.
Yeah.
We're like 60 now. And probably at least half of those are under the age of 18.
Yeah.
So we got a pretty sizable group of kids. We got a bunch of families with 3 and 4 and 5 kids. So
I think that's a pretty typical Vineyard story, you know?
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. What are some of the gifts that come with leading worship at a smaller church?
Well, I was thinking about this, and it's like there's a connectedness. Everybody in the church pretty much knows everybody.
Right.
Pretty well. And it's not, when guests come, if you're not willing to have people get in your business pretty quick, it's not like a small tight church. You can't walk in anonymity and figure out if you like it.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to have people. And that's a different aspect of church that, you can go to a big church and go for a couple months and just not engage and kind of hide.
Yeah.
And figure out if that's where you want to be. But in a small church, you don't really have that luxury, Yeah,
if you're sitting on the back row, you're still only 10 feet away from the stage, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, we set up 60 chairs, I think every week, maybe, I think 60.
Yeah.
And right now, and we're and I'll get to it when I'm talking about some of these gifts, because I feel like the space we're in right now really helps with some of these things, and or at least we've kind of used it to our advantage. But some of my thoughts on this are really shaped by the year and a half that we spent meeting outside, and what we learned about what we need to do church. Like for us, like really, and I'll get into some of that as we go on. But there's a connectedness with your congregation that, like, there's no fourth wall. There's no divide really. There's no stage. We're on the floor. That we don't have lights. It's not dark in the back, and we're lit up. I can see people. I can hear individual voices. I know who's singing out what part. Like, one of the benefits to that to me is like musically, the voices singing become the focus of musically. Even, obviously that's the focus of worship, us singing to God and expressing that. But there's an element where like the music is just there to provide a backdrop to the voices singing. And I can hear the congregation better in this building than any place we've been.
Right.
Or meeting now. I think leaning into that, and there's advantages and disadvantages to that, obviously. There's creatively certain things I don't get to do.
Right.
Musically, we don't get to rock as, we don't get to like be a worship honky tonk as much as I want it to be. But what we get is a place where I think that people really feel a connectedness to worship.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So what I hear you saying is like connectedness. People know each other as part of the gift of leading worship in a small church. And then also just very practically hearing the voices on Sunday morning really, I mean, that's a special thing, isn't it? When you're in maybe a smaller room and maybe the sound system isn't as big and overpowering, and it's much more kind of an us feeling. Well, let me ask you this, Derek. What do you think can happen in your church that maybe doesn't happen, or maybe even can't happen in a room of 2,000 or 3,000 people?
Well, I think I regularly learn about songs from the people in my church, like, because these are all people we hang out with and are friends with, and they'll be like, "Hey, I really like this song. You should listen to it." And then when they walk in and then I start playing that song, it really gives them and you can't, if you tried to do that in a church of 500 or 1,000, like, man, you'd shut it off. You'd be like, no more. I'm not. And so there's some elements of that.
If you had 1,000 people coming to you every Sunday, Derek, do this song. Yeah.
It's already hard enough. There's so much worship material out there.
Right.
We live in a time where we're blessed to have so much to choose from, but we're also a little bit cursed because we have so much to choose from.
Right.
It's kind of, it's a bit of both. I always gravitate more to a song when I've heard it in a worship setting versus just hearing it on a record or on the radio or on the app or whatever in the car. So I think there's that congregational input. It's doable and it's organic. And for me, had someone suggest a song I encouraged her to. She was kind of someone who would never do that.
Yeah.
She was like, I'm not going to impose my opinion. And she was like, I couldn't wait to play it for her when she came, because it was like one of those, she'll love this. And she was tickled. And I was grinning ear to ear, just knowing that I could do that and you can kind of do those sort of things in a way that you can't, logistically, you just can't in a larger setting. And so I think some of those things are true.
Well, part of what I hear you saying in that, though, Derek, is it's, again, that idea of connectedness, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and something, I could be totally off here. I think historically, we lean so much on how to do, what church should be like from the epistles, like from Paul's letters, from Acts, and we see this stuff, and like there's no model for extrapolating that out for masses of people. Most of it's like small groups of believers meeting, and and there's that philosophy. A lot of people are like the whole idea of once your church gets to a certain size, split it off and spread out. And then they pick different amounts where that's important. But I think there's something to that where the New Testament model's largely in practicality directed at that type of environment. Now, obviously, as the church grew, that changed and had to, which is a good thing. But I think we've got a lot of practical tips that are for small numbers. So.
Well, Derek, picking up on that idea, when Paul's writing 1 Corinthians, and I'm even thinking of sections of 1 Corinthians where he's talking about how to do spiritual gifts, and like chapter 12, 13, and 14, where he's saying, I'd rather you guys prophesy than speak in tongues and stuff. He's writing largely to a collection of really small churches. And one of the things that I know by my experience is that Holy Spirit ministry can be done in any size church. It can be done, in a room of 10,000 people. But I just know that it is so easy to do it in a group of like 30, 40, 50. It is so easy. There's something about that number that to me is kind of magical for doing actually really activated Holy Spirit, everybody gets to play ministry. It can be done at larger, but it's just, man, it is a lot easier when the room is a little smaller. And everybody. So there's also that thing when you're in a bigger room trying to do some of this stuff, you're like, is a crazy person about to grab the microphone? Because I don't know.
Oh, yeah. And we've had that happen, of course.
Of course you have. But there's just something about when the room is a little smaller and you actually do know everybody. It's like, oh, yeah.
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 Yeah, and there are pitfalls to that. You can fall into unintentionally not being as welcoming as you need to be.
Right.
Because you're comfortable. And we talk a lot about that just to make sure that we're not just a little club that we want to keep the same way. We want to, the church can be healthy at 50 or 500 or 5,000. A church can be unhealthy at 50 or 500 or 5,000. 100%. It's there's no right way to do it in terms of size. It's just you've got to figure out where you're at and what works for you.
Well, let me ask you this: we talked about some of the gifts? What are some of the challenges of leading worship at a smaller church?
One, burnout for volunteers. Volunteers tend to do a lot and do it over and over again, and you don't necessarily have the people to have a proper rotation. Then buy-in. I think momentum. When you're in a larger setting and you have loads of people who want to volunteer, even if it's a small percentage of your congregation, it's still a lot of people. And you get this momentum and buy-in when you have a whole bunch of people that can buy in and they do, it creates this momentum that's hard. And then, of course, from a worship perspective, from music, like the talent pool question of obviously that I've heard you talk about this and I've seen it in action and how you created that, you raised it up, you created a space to develop it. And I know I talk with Mike about that a lot too. We've always been blessed to have I feel like it's a pretty great amount of talented folks for the size we are. And I would say our worship team now is probably, I think there's 9 of us maybe total.
Yeah.
But I've got 3 or 4 people that are multi-instrumentalists and flexible, and there's ways we've combated a lot of what would have been previous challenges, and I can speak to that too.
Yeah, say something about that. What are the ways that you've tried to work around that, working around fatigue, or working around maybe not having every position that you wanted or felt like you needed?
Well, I think coming into 2020, I was feeling that comparison, like, what are we doing? Are we keeping, and then the pandemic really, like, in so many ways, it was a blessing for how we do what we do and what we think we need as a church. Doing Zoom for a couple of months, which was like the worst thing ever.
Oh, man.
I'm thankful that we had it, better that we had it than not. But we started meeting outside. We did a couple different locations, but man, we set up a camping potty and a little camping tent. So I was like, man, you're willing to go to church and pee outside in a tent. You're like, it frames things in a good perspective, I think. And we ended up meeting outside through August of 2021.
Yeah.
And we had several people come and join the church because of that, become a part of it because they liked it. They were actually a little bummed that my kids are still mad that we're meeting inside. They loved it.
Yeah.
We've done portable church a couple of times. We were in the building you were in until about 2012, and we were a little bit house poor. And so we went back to portable church for a little while, and it nearly killed us because the set up and tear down and load in and load out killed any sense of community and fellowship we had.
Yeah.
By the time everybody's packed up, they just left. Settling in another building, we outgrew that. We moved to another building, and we let that building go during the pandemic because we were like, why are we going to pay rent if we're not? Our lease was up, so we just let it ride.
Yeah.
We're renting a space now just on Sundays. And man, it's a really cool space. It's an old train depot that was converted. It's like a place called the Athens Community Council on Aging that assists the elderly in our community. And years back, we used to partner with them when we were in our old building. And so now we're getting back to the place where we're starting to partner with them again and trying to do some stuff to help them. We meet in their building. But man, the acoustics in the room we're meeting in are so incredible for acoustic music. Like, yeah. It accentuates that whole, you can hear the congregation singing.
Yeah.
I mean, we could literally get away with not using sound. It's that live. But technically I've done a lot to minimize the strain in terms of the setup. We use a very minimal PA. Right now my core group is acoustic guitar, bass. I built a drum set out of a suitcase. It's a little tiny drum set, and I have a cellist and a violinist, a couple that are married that are our string section. And man, it's great.
Derek, that sounds like a huge gift. That just sounds like a huge gift. What a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we really have gotten into a groove. Like because I know, when it's small like we are, I was like, I'm going to carry the brunt of it, and we're going to load a sound system in and out every week. So we've got like a stick PA with stick and sub, and the entire sound system fits in the back of my van with my instruments.
Right.
And it takes 5 minutes to load in and out.
Yeah.
That's a practical way we've kind of handled that.
So what I hear you saying there is you're not killing people with logistics and Sunday morning load in, tear down, set up, that kind of thing. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Do you have any support staff or volunteers who help you get things ready?
Just the team that shows up that day. And right now, and we've been doing this since the pandemic, and it's just working. We don't have like loads of people at every spot. So I send the email, say, hey, if you want to play this week, come play. Yeah. Now occasionally I'll specify who I want to play drums, but man, we're totally come as you are. For the folks that are on the team, most everybody playing so comfortable that we can kind of shift in and out of things, and it just works.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this. I would assume that in a smaller church, the worship leader also has to kind of be the tech specialist and the person who fixes anything that goes wrong. You know what I mean? So what would you want to say about the need to be a decent generalist? Maybe you have to run sound or fix stuff, lead the band, make sure the overheads are ready, like whatever is happening on the screen or whatever. Talk to me about being a generalist. Is that your experience? Is that real? If so, what do you want to say?
I think it's very real.
Yeah.
I think nothing for the technical aspect of it. Working in a music store for 16 years probably prepared me for that as much as anything.
Yeah.
Being on top of gear. And, one of the things I remember talking with some of the leadership years about in some of the training conferences we did through the, regional stuff, it was, there's always a sound training, and it's always for like, here's this nice 32 channel digital board and this great sound system, make it sound good. Well, yeah, that's fun. But I was like, what about when you get to, and you've experienced this going around and playing at churches, you never know what kind of PA you're going to get.
Oh, never.
It's like, what do you do when you get a hodgepodge PA and you got to figure out how to make it a PV box mixer work and sound good, and of course technology now is so, I control everything from an app on my phone right in front of me. So I unmute everything. We kind of, because of the nature of ours being truly sound reinforcement, the voices carry everything.
Yeah.
My mic's not a whole lot louder than the congregation is, than individual singers, because it's just enough to lead. We kind of a set it and forget it sort of policy. And if we know it's a holiday weekend and I know most of my folks are out of town, we circle up chairs and I sit in one of the chairs with the people, and we just do it, worshiping around.
Yeah. So
there's that element of it where being a generalist is good, but it's also caused me to go, okay, what do we really need? Big and loud is fun. And like my kids love, I don't know if you heard that song Jericho, the Andrew Rip song. My kids love that song. It's huge sounding song, and vocally it's a great song. I'll, rip on it in ministry time a little bit, but, or something like that. But, the songs like that are hard to do. And, it's like, you can't play Did You Feel the Mountains Tremble in small group because it's just not going to resonate.
Yeah.
It feels, I was thinking about that concept and thinking about today, this whole idea. It's like songs that are geared to bigger settings are recorded for that. Like, does the song stand on its own? Can you play it in small group? And does it work?
Let me ask you this, so you can kind of like maybe riff on that for a second. Well, what kind of songs resonate with your church? And I don't just mean your people, I mean the room, like the number of people and the space that you're in. Because I've just noticed, I just have this really, it's like a working theory. You're already hitting on it, Derek, and it's like there are certain songs that just work anywhere, right? Any room, anytime, any space. It's just like a card you can pull, and it resonates. But then there are other songs that it almost seems like they're tailor-made for a room of 150 people in a fairly live acoustic setting, right? And then there's other songs that are stadium. It's like stadium worship or something, It's like the big smashers, and they just something about. It's not just the production, but it's something about the melodies or.
Well, it's about the immersion. You're immersed in this thing, and it really encourages you to. Yeah. I think our crowd like home cooked stuff. They can take an ownership of that. One of the guys in my church, we've been doing a song of his, and it's it feels like it sounds like a song George Harrison would have written.
In what way? Say more about that.
Like just the flow of the melody, and he's a big Beatles fan, and I think the flow of the melody and the progression and everything, and it feels like that in terms of I need to share that song with folks. It's a great tune.
Yeah.
But when we played it and I introduced it and said this is Josh's song, like everybody loved it and they embraced it. It's like, this is one of our people. This stuff. Yeah. With y'all encourage songwriting more than anybody probably. Yeah. And we've done some songwriting groups in the past and things like that. And we do some of my tunes. There's a lady who's been in our church since the beginning who's written great songs. They love that. But I think more than anything, songs that are where it's the focus of the song is not a guitar riff. It's not songs with really strong melodies. Yeah, really hit home well. I can play How Deep the Father's Love for Us like that anytime, and everybody's in, like,
Yeah.
because that song is all about that pretty melody and the build of it, and any song, I feel like any song without a set verse or chorus that's just kind of like a repetitive hymn, like, for better terms, really works.
Derek, what about Ryan Delmore tunes? Because I could hear a Ryan Delmore tune being like a perfect thing for your all space.
Almost weekly. There's usually a Delmore.
Yeah. This is back into my theory. There's something about the songs that Ryan writes, and it'll just tear a room up, especially when it's kind of like that, like a church that feels like a family church, and a couple hundred people together just tears it up.
I don't know what his church is like. I've never been there, but I wonder if it's like that. If it's like that. I mean, I know that was back in the day when it blew up in the late 90s. But what happens to churches that blow up like that with young people is they end up turning into churches with young families. And then that's what our church did. We were like all 20-something mostly, and then there were some older families, and then all those people started having kids. When I first started having kids, we had our church birthed like 40 kids in 3 years. Yeah. Those sorts of things. And so we joked about just growing internally rather than externally. We do a lot of those tunes. One of the things, and I remember talking to Ryan about this, if you pay attention to a lot of his songs, there's very often not a second verse. Yeah. There's a verse and a chorus. And I asked him about that one time, and he said, he's like, most of the time when I try to write a second verse, it feels thrown in or not as good. And so I just don't. I'm like, that kind of restraint is huge. But we do a lot. I lean into the kind of country rock styling a little bit, and so his stuff fits really well. Well,
and I want to say something about what Ryan was telling you. The truth is, a lot of early Vineyard songs were verse chorus songs. Just A-B.
Or they were like, you think about a song like "Isn't He" or something,
Yeah, 2 parts.
Way deep. Like that song, if you play it once through, it's over in 45 seconds. But if you lean into it, man, it's fire. It's good.
It is, and that's actually something I've asked for from our songwriters is to write a few more just verse chorus songs, like a really great verse and a really great chorus. I mean, they're so useful. I love those kinds of songs because you can pull them out anywhere. And even if a room doesn't know them, one time through, you've actually taught the song, and second time through, the church is in. Yeah, you're not hitting them.
Well, I think a lot of times, and for some reason, a song that popped in my head thinking about it, that it's one of your guys' tunes, that wonderful song. That's one of Sam's tunes, right?
Yeah, it is.
That song has verses, but they're themed together. They progress intentionally in a way that you couldn't take one of them out and have the song be okay. It would be missing. Yeah. And so, having songs like that, if you're going to add it, you're going to tell the story. But I feel like a lot, and I tend to struggle with this too when I write a song. It's hard to come up with good ladder verses or a bridge or whatever, and have it fit and not feel forced. Yeah. And so that was a revelation to me, not writing another verse, just letting it be. I think we're artists. We're always trying to make it better, or fix it, or say, oh, this could be better. And I can't tell you how many hours I've spent trying to fix phrasing in something, and then ultimately I try to change it. And people are like, oh, why'd you change that? Right. So those sorts of things. I think the simplicity, and I don't want this to sound like an attack on big things, but you can't hide lackluster songwriting behind an arrangement, in a setting like we have. And so, I try to focus on songs that are going to resonate. And there's some songs that really have resonated with our congregation. They keep coming back into play, and I can always, You Redeem My Soul is one of those. Like you said, that song's going to resonate anywhere. So it says everything it needs to say perfectly with one verse and one chorus. Yeah. Another one we've always seemed to come back out of the rotation is Unfailing Love. Our people love that song. Yeah. The old Trent song. And I'm bad about remembering who wrote things especially if it's outside of I usually know the Vineyard songs who wrote them.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I know the people, and that gives you buy-in, gives you, when I can say, I remember this when Servant Wide Awake came out, and I think we introduced it, and I think at the time my pastor's daughter, I was having her sing the lead on it, and I talked about it. It's like, hey, this was a Delmore song, but it's written by originally it was written by his daughter, who's like 11. I said 11-year-olds can write worship songs, like that sort of thing, and it's something that that I think anytime I can create a connectivity to a song to our people, I think that really brings it to life.
That's rad.
So,
okay, so let me ask you this, Derek. How many other people lead at your church?
I've got 2 other leaders stepping in right now.
Do you guys all lead every Sunday, or do you guys kind of like take turns on Sundays?
We usually it's just one person, and then I'll step out. But if I'm not leading, I'll play, and then there's nobody to play something else, I'll step in on drums or step in on bass or. You're a
generalist.
Yes, I am. I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. But it's good. It's good to have that flexibility. And last week we decided our bass player couldn't make it, and I was leading, and so I was like, well, let's just. Our pastor has a monk drum, so we just did acoustic guitar monk drum but we had cello and violin. And it's funny, one of the things if you used to play in a big setting, having things that drone really helped it feel not naked, right?
Yeah.
Like having a layer.
Yeah.
And I messed around with a while with running a synth on my phone in the background, and it was just more. This was years ago. It was just more hassle for me. I don't think that way. I'm not good with that kind of stuff. And but having a cellist, like when it's chill and she's just man, it's gold. It's gold.
Yeah, that's a huge gift. Well, Derek, let's land here. Your situation is not unique in the Vineyard. There's lots and lots of Vineyard churches that are smaller, and there's lots and lots of Vineyard worship leaders who lead in contexts very, very similar to you. I guess we should land here. What would you want to say to other worship leaders who are leading churches and that are about your size, or maybe a touch bigger, even a touch smaller, but also just rooms like yours where it's mostly acoustic? Maybe the band is smaller. It's really live. You really hear the voices. What would you want to say to your brothers and sisters who are in the same field as you?
I would say focus inward. Like, look at your building, look at your space, and say what fits best here, what works. Trying to make it something it's not. I was thinking about this in terms of you try to play a big song in a small setting with a style like that, and man, it just feels thin. And of course, I always think it's sort of like butter scraped over too much bread, to quote Bilbo Baggins. But I used to fall in that because I don't want it to be. I like loud. I burned my eardrums up for years as a young man in clubs and playing in bands. But figuring out what works, and you can find everything's not out there. It's not like arena big sound. Like you can find this acoustic stuff. And I think for me, going back to the early days when Enter the Worship Circle came out, I think that was one of the things that was so great about it, is it wasn't this polished, produced thing. In fact, that record really doesn't sound very good from a sound perspective.
Yeah.
But man, something happened there. You think a little bit early days Vineyard, when they just capture what was happening in the room, is really, really look at, if you're someone out there who is struggling with that, struggling with momentum, struggling with feeling like things are thin, think about what songs are going to get my congregation to really engage, really sing. And if you're small enough, if you got some people you see not really engaging physically or audibly in worship, talk to them, have a conversation with them. Hey, what'd you grow up with? What do you like? What songs resonate? If you take a little effort and make someone feel like you care about the things that are important to them, that might unlock them and their willingness and freedom to step out and worship and sing. And, don't try, like, I occasionally will play electric guitar. I have a 6-watt tube amp that I run on the 3-watt setting, and it's still too loud, but occasionally I'll do it, and I can barely get it loud enough to not sound terrible. But I don't do it that often because it just doesn't serve our space well.
Yeah.
I'll occasionally play it when someone else is leading, but it's really fine. Tune out the noise of what's popular, of what's trendy, because if you just generally search for worship, you're going to see big things from big places. That's the way, because they get more traction, they get more attention. But man, there's so much good stuff out there that's small potatoes, for lack of a better term, that's God is blessed by and God is in. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice by constantly trying to keep up with the Joneses.
I think part of what I'm hearing you say, Derek, is just there really are gifts in spaces and rooms like you serve in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, here's what I would love, Derek. I would so love it if you would maybe drop that tune you were talking about. You should drop it on the Facebook page for everybody.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Harrison tune. Yeah, I'll find a recording of it and get it up.
Yeah, you should put it up. And if you guys don't know Derek, you should get to know Derek. He's one of the best singers in the Vineyard. No joke. And really, really cool to have you on the pod this week, Derek.
Oh man, thanks so much for having me. It's great to catch up with you and great to talk about this stuff. And I think I'll go back in feeling more encouraged about what we do, just talking about the blessing of our situation. So
amen. Yeah. Amen. All right, everybody. Catch you later. Peace.
Hey everyone, Casey Corum here, producer of the podcast. Thanks for listening. As always, if you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. First of all, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media. Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. See you next week. Peace.